So this is a pretty heady episode of Really No Really, because I saw that Ray Kurzweil, who is a futurist who they say has one of the best records for predicting things that have come true.
He's the Jimmy the Greek of futurists.
He said by 2023, a $1,000 laptop would have a human brain's computing power and storage capability, and many other things. And the latest thing he said was that humans will achieve immortality in 8 years.
Really? No, really? Really? No, really? Really?
Today we'll be chatting with a gentleman who is the professor of Biological Gerontology at the University of Brighton. He is the past chair of the British Society for Research on Aging and the American Aging Association. He's been studying the relationship between cellular senescence, which we will find out more about, and aging for more than 30 years. He's been named one of the top 100 longevity leaders by Aging Analytics. Please welcome, from the University of Brighton, Professor of Biological Gerontology, Professor Richard Faragher.
How are you doing, Professor?
Very well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on the show, particularly when the introductions apparently have reached their peak. The people may get you, but this is the point where it all,
comes to roost.
It came to the peak. And
I
then
just
it
have to
crashed.
say right off the top that the accent and the tie, this is the classiest we will ever be on this show.
Well, it's funny, my son used to say this, that if because he went to England for a semester, and he came back and he said, in America, when a guy's in a park yelling, "The world's coming to an end. We're all the..." Yeah. You go, what a lunatic. In Britain, you go, "Tell me more."
Yeah.
The world is coming to an end. It sounds so credible and reasonable. You go, "Okay, come to the house."
It's the lack of TV channels.
Exactly.
It comes from, I went into gerontology because I was growing up in the 70s and there were like 3 TV channels. And so all of them were, there was nothing on. And it encouraged you to go outside and sit on a wall and wait for something to happen and think. So that's how I ended. That's how I ended up here. What's your excuse?
Nothing to do. Hey, we're just talking to you. We didn't go into it. All right.
Oh my God.
So the interesting thing is, I got the overall question for me, and we can get into singularity and Kurzweil. But as you get older, what actually endures? I mean, that's the biggest question there is. If you don't have a reason to live, what's the point of living longer? And so when you study this, is that taken into consideration?
The immortality thing always kind of makes me smile because it sits at the opposite end of a spectrum. If I do kind of public understanding of science lectures, about one time in 5, there's a guy who comes up to me and says, "I don't want to live forever." And I always say, "That's great, because you don't have the option." And they always look disappointed. And it's strange, because I'm thinking, if I went into a restaurant, if he went into a restaurant, I would say a waiter, and, he opened the menu and said, "I really hate crab cakes." And I said, "Well, you're in luck, sir, because we're not serving them tonight." I wouldn't expect the guy to glare at me. It's just I demand you serve me stuff I don't like. And at the other end, there is this immortality thing. And it's often helpful to unpack, I think, what that means to the person who said it. Alongside the guy who says, "I don't want to live forever," there's usually someone who says, "I do." And rather than, just disappointing them straight out, I try and let them down gently by saying, "Are you aware that, forever is a bugger of a long time, actually? A reasonable argument can be made that it's all the time there is. This isn't a long time as humans count time. This is like a long time as stars count time. We are talking multiple stellar lifetimes here.
Yeah. You put it. Already. We're done. You got it. You got me.
There we go. Okay, that's it.
So,
you can.
Professor,
oh my gosh, that's great.
Is gerontology, particularly in the way that you are researching it, is it about living longer or living better longer, or some combination?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because lying behind these kinds of discussions is something that I think is going to be really important and is going to be really transformative, if not for us, then for our kids. And I think that's incredibly hopeful. And so, as long as there have been people, we've known that something about how old you are also affects how healthy you are.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a lot of evidence that there are a few common processes. You can call them aging mechanisms if you want. I tend to think of them as health maintenance mechanisms that exist to keep us healthy. Problems start to occur as they start to fail. For the first time in human history, I think we've got a pretty good handle on what some of those mechanisms are. And we can chat about that if you would like. And this understanding is starting to reach the point where we are starting to go into clinical trials with some compounds based on this. And most clinical trials fail. The analogy that I sometimes use with people is a clinical trial is a bit like getting an audition. Okay, you've got an audition. You probably shouldn't be picking out the place for your star on Hollywood Boulevard just yet, or wondering which private island you're going to build.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do a lot of those if you make it there. But the clinical trials are there. There's plenty of them. To stick with the audition analogy, if you're not getting any auditions, you never will be an A-lister. And I think it's fair to say the mechanisms are kind of screen testing well. There's 60 ongoing trials, I think, on drugs that destroy senescent cells at the moment. The failure of a trial rate is well over 90%, but this could just be a numbers game now. But that's what I said. But then, it's what you lob downrange.
And can you just, because I have it written down here and I have some understanding, but can you just, for the people watching, talk about senescence for a moment and what that is?
Absolutely. I'm very happy to do that. So as I say, there seems to be good evidence for some biological processes acting as what we call aging mechanisms. And if you get rid of it, that slows aging down. And if you increase the rate at which it appears, it speeds aging up. So what happens with cell senescence is this. It was first discovered by a very bright guy called Leonard Hayflick in the early 60s. And you don't have to be a scientist to ask some quite profound questions about things like this, which is the normal state of the cells in your body to divide forever, or do they have inbuilt limits to division? For reasons that don't matter, for a little while in the early 20th century, it was believed that cells had no limits to division. Hayflick showed that they did, and since they had limits to division, this suggested that the accumulation of these cells over time would contribute to aging and disease. And so the way it works simply is this. In the normal course of your life, you lose cells. That loss has to be balanced by cell division, or you run out of cells. That cell division is actively monitored as part of an anti-cancer mechanism, because you pick up most of the mutations that predispose you to cancer when you're replicating DNA. Mm-hmm. And after a variable number of divisions, that cell does two things. It will never divide again, and it changes its behavior, and it adopts a series of damaging activities. Why is it doing this? Because it wants to be found and killed by the cells in your immune system. It wants to be got rid of. The problem is that your immune system is also made of cells, and it is aging. And so when you're young, as soon as you make a senescent cell, it's clobbered by your immune system. When you're kind of my age, it's more like, you ring the insurance company or something like that, and it's just, your call is important to us. You will stay on the line, And it's kind of like that. So these things start to build up, and this starts to cause all sorts of problems. In laboratory animals, where we've been able to engineer them such that it's possible to remove senescent cells chemically, you see an increase in lifespan of about 25%, sometimes to 30%. And what you also see is a big improvement in health. But the data that I like most is wheel running. If you take these little mice that have had their senescent cells removed and you compare them to their litter mates who've been left alone, they run about twice as far and about twice as fast. And no one's making these mice run. They're running more because they like it. And if you could translate that into the human population, it's the difference between being able to live independently in your own home, jog down to the shop to buy the paper in the morning, or having to feel your world kind of contract around you,
Right.
not
So
being able
the key
to go out.
the key to all of this is controlling senescent cells. If you can get to the core of that, that seems to be the key to life extension. Yes.
This is where the caveats start to come in. It's clear that at least one angle of attack would be to either get rid of senescent cells. There are groups that are working on that. Stop them being senescent under certain indications, which is something I'm very interested in. One of the things that I think is currently unknown is how big the effect of the different aging mechanisms we know about is in different species. So in mice, when you get rid of senescent cells, you can see a 30 to 40% increase in lifespan. Whether you would see an extension, and the reason you're seeing the extension in lifespan is the animal is healthier. This is an important point to stress. Sick things tend to die. Healthy things tend to live. Mm-hmm. So if you are, like most reputable gerontologists most of the time, trying to improve health, you get the lifespan extension as a kind of beneficial side effect. But if everything we did just improved health and didn't lengthen lifespan by a single day, I'd be pretty happy. I'd feel I'd made a real contribution.
Right.
And so, it's we could be on the verge of real improvements in the health of our older population, and that is something we sorely need.
Is there any research into animals that naturally seem to live greater lifespans? I think I know there's some tortoise, it might be the Galapagos tortoise or something, that seems to, on average, live well past 100 years. Is anybody looking to those kind of animals that have natural longevity to see if there's something there?
Some, but not much, because if you think about the difficulties, you ever seen a Galapagos tortoise? Or the Mauritian giant tortoise. I actually honeymooned. I did. I honeymooned in Mauritius specifically to see a Mauritian giant tortoise.
Wow! And did you?
And I did, and they're misnamed. It shouldn't be called the Mauritian giant tortoise. It should be called the Jesus Christ, that thing's the size of a sofa tortoise, which kind of and this kind of. There's a picture of me and the tortoise, and one of us is wrinklier than the other, but not by much now. And this illustrates the problem. It's very, very difficult to do research or maintain a colony of Mauritian giant tortoises that you could study. Some whale species are noticeably longer lived than humans, but I would love to see the grant committee. I just need a few, 100 million to maintain a humpback whale colony.
But let me ask you a question. To Jason's point, though, there are microbes that have been discovered that they think are thousands of years old that are still metabolically functioning, and certain jellyfish can reproduce and start all over again. I mean, if they're injured.
I was going to say there's a couple. So on the one hand, some species are ruled out because they're not physically tractable. The point is a really strong one I was going to circle back There's a difference between holding an organism, in sort of stasis for a long period of time. We routinely maintain bacteria frozen at -80 for decades, and we pull them out when we need them. There are species that are tractable, that are what we call non-aging, by which I mean, as I said, your chance of death goes up exponentially. But if you are one of this select number of species, your chance of death stays fixed. And if you've ever had clam chowder, you've eaten these guys, because it's the quahog. All right. And the clams in your bowl of clam chowder were probably older than you were. And
I feel terrible.
The older, don't. It gets
Wait a minute. I got to sit with that for a second. I think I just gave up clam chowder.
Yeah.
The clam chowder's in the bowl you're eating your fire.
The potential that I've destroyed.
Potentially. I'm not, look, don't sue if it turns out they're younger than you.
But also on the positive side, what were they doing that was so exciting that I shouldn't enjoy a nice clam chowder?
But you know what else I think?
Yeah.
The clam's going to have been around 200 years. Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Right.
They're going to take me now for his soup? Right. What the hell?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was just about to cure cancer, and now I'm I'm Manhattan or New England, sir.
Progresso.
The very oldest clams are so old that Shakespeare could have had them. The very oldest quahogs are so old that Shakespeare could have had them in a bowl of stew. And this came out in a project quite a few years ago now, which led to a kind of car crash interview for me, because the guys who were doing the work got in touch with me. And in a kind of round the houses thing, I suddenly found myself on radio being accused of finding the world's oldest animal and then killing it, which is kind of hard one to, it's a bit of a curveball when you're a bit jet lagged and you come in. But to go back to Jason's original point, that is a species that is small enough to work on. You could potentially look at extremely long life. One of the interesting things that we also tend to do is we like to look at species that have shorter lifespans than ours, just because we kind of like to get the study done while we're all still alive. And so there's particular interest. It's just one of those things. Yeah. If anybody is amenable to a lifetime's worth of funding, then I'm very happy.
My God. Makes a lot of sense.
I suspect not.
You bring up a good bridge into some of the ethical questions and moral questions around this research. The most basic of which being, I see every reason to be increasing the health of our health as we live and as we age. But are we potentially doing great harm by trying to increase substantially the longevity of human life? I think particularly about overpopulation. I think about the resources that we have on this planet. If we're going to continue to make babies at the rate that we do, and the average lifespan becomes 100, 120, 125 plus years, what problems are we creating?
And not to mention that my kid's still going to be living at age
78. Yeah, he's a drain on you now, and at 78, you won't retire till you're 160, Peter.
160? I wish I had a pension for 160. From your mouth, man.
I mean, yeah. On the side, you're making you actually put your finger on a very important point. And oddly enough, have you been reading my papers that I've just submitted?
I am fascinated by everything that is
right. Okay, well, thank you. What can I say? You doing anything after this? But effectively, this is a really important point about the ethics. Before we go back to the funny stuff, I take this pretty seriously, and one of the things, it's not often said, but it's there running through everything we do as scientists. The unspoken social contract between the scientific community and the broader public is basically that we only use our powers for good.
Right.
Okay? So that we only do things that are of social benefit. And there is absolutely out there no mass support for greatly extended
Right.
lifespans. It's there, but it's a minority position, a distinct minority position. There's a huge amount of support for getting rid of the ill health that comes with later life. Nobody either wants personally to spend the last 14 or 15 years in a miserable condition, or wants to look at somebody they care about, mother, brother, wife, whatever, in the same place. Right. And I think that represents the moral boundary of our work being serious. There are a couple of bits and pieces that always kind of entertain me, because strangely enough, it always coupled with lifespan extension is overpopulation.
Right.
When was the last time you had kids? I've done it once, and I'm really not. I'm not. I have a longer life expectancy than I would have done in 1900. I'm not rubbing my hands together and saying, "Hey, bring on the nappy changing. I can't wait."
Well, yeah, but
so
I also
there
know
is
Alec
no,
Baldwin, who
Alec Baldwin has 47 kids. And by the way, what's his name? Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon is just.
But I do know older people. I mean, people in their 70s that are continuing to have children.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying it's not automatic.
Right.
If we were able, and these are moderate estimates, if we were able to translate the increases in the healthy period of the life that we see in experimental animals in the laboratory into the American healthcare system, then the US alone saves about $7 trillion gross, about $4 trillion net out to 2050. Now, these are sums of money which to me are just too large to have meaning, I'll be perfectly honest. So I tend to translate them into something concrete. You're talking about the US saving money roughly equivalent to about 40% of all the gold ever mined, or enough to give everybody on Earth clean drinking water for about the next 3 decades. So if we don't go down that road and we don't start treating the ill health in later life, we're going to spend more money than ever before to keep more people than ever before, more miserable.
How do you
than
convince
ever before.
people?
I kind of have trouble seeing that as a win.
Yeah.
And we're not a prevention society. We're not. The things we prioritize are not necessarily the right things. But before we go, the amazing thing is the scientific advances. Just my wife. I look at my wife. We used to have the trumpet, the ear trumpet, way back for hearing impaired, and then you had hearing aids, and now she has a cochlear implant. That stuff is advancing pretty rapidly as far as technological advances. Are we advancing that rapidly in health?
Yeah, I don't think it's an overstatement, because I try and walk, as I said, this difficult line between conveying the optimism without conveying the hype, and conveying some of the pessimism without sounding like a naysayer. But I think that we are at a point in later life disease roughly equivalent to, it's about 1940, 1938, and antibiotics are just on the scene.
All right.
Wow.
So,
that's pretty big.
And if you think about the analogy, it kind of sticks. If you had an infected tooth and a time machine, you sure as hell would dial in some point, after about 1960 to get it treated.
Right.
But penicillin didn't solve all the world's problems. It didn't even solve all bacterial infections. And it does flag up something important, which I think not a lot of politicians and policymakers are alert to yet, though that is changing, which is we are not the only people talking about this. And quietly but persistently, countries are gearing up to move into this space.
Boy, that would be...
And the countries and companies that have the production facilities and hold the patents on these new drugs will have a commanding lead for good or ill in 21st century healthcare.
And you just
So,
hope that it's
you know,
affordable.
it's fun to
Yeah.
talk about, but
Yeah. But and then the inequality seeps into that, et cetera. And like you said, I hope good rather than evil. One last thing, you said it, which was really interesting, that you don't want to hype it. You were very careful about the negative and positive. In doing this show, sometimes we hit heady topics and some not. But in the science community, I noticed too, because of clickbait and because of getting people's attention, I'm noticing in the scientific community, just like in every other community, people are tending now to exaggerate findings, to tease what's going on because they want funding, they want to cut through and make noise, but not like I've seen in the past, more so than I've ever seen before, to get attention, and claims that are out there that catch the public's imagination, but that may misrepresent totally.
Like what? Give me a for instance.
Like you're going to live forever.
What have you heard? Oh,
Yeah,
like
like
you're
in
gonna
10
live
minutes,
forever?
that kind of claim. It's a huge claim that grabs you. We did a show about it just now because we saw this futurist who said you could reach that point.
But he's also talking about that. Kurzweil was talking about not only medications, but engineering,
Nanotechnology.
nanobots.
Yeah.
You know, he's talking about making human beings somewhat less human in order to
But
extend
you also
this
have
experience.
you have like a David Sinclair who's doing research who makes claims also, and that there are people probably on the planet now that are 150 and we just don't know it. And then you see the guy driving a car at 109. You know, so you
which
see
is-
those headlines.
yeah.
They kind of push out the sense that maybe we're not seeing it.
My
but
Aunt Vivian is 92 and she's driving a car, and I don't.
and we should say, tell her to give you the
Well,
keys.
you know, it's enough already,
Yeah.
right? I mean, first of all, where is she going?
Well, but that's the important
She
thing.
needs
You know
a
what?
car,
I think, and you'll all agree with this, the people who live the longest have purpose.
Well, sure.
There you go.
Yes.
So your Aunt Vivian has a purpose.
Well, I'll push back on that.
I mean, you know, the way I tend to look at it, guys, is this. I think you've identified a really important point, Peter, and my answer is a pretty blunt one, which is if scientists start talking like science fiction authors, where will the public go
Thank
for
you.
scientists?
Yep.
That is really important to me. We have a duty to inform. We do not have a duty to
Right.
mislead.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. But so many, man, like
You know, and but again, it's part of the, and so, you know, sometimes it's accidental, sometimes it's, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's misplaced enthusiasm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
inspiration.
yeah,
Sure.
You know, that's, again, malice I think is probably sitting at the bottom of the list. One of the things a lot of scientists often have trouble with is they honestly can't believe that people don't know as much about cyclin-dependent kinase inhibition as they do. Because what else do people talk about in the evening?
Really? Absolutely.
wow, that's embarrassing.
My takeaway from this whole thing
Yeah, I know.
is
You
no
know,
matter
it's,
what, no matter what the professor's working on and all of his colleagues, not you and me, we ain't gonna get to us.
We're creeping.
You and
we're creeping toward it.
Yeah.
We're minutes away.
We're going a little faster than he is.
Baba Ramdas, be here now because tomorrow closer than you
the
think.
other thing, the other thing I would say, gents, we're into prediction, and it's a pivot away from my day job. But I have a dirty little hobby that I'm happy to admit to live, which is I collect old visions of the future. You know those cities of brynylon and Teflon on the moon that we should be living in now, but we're not. And there's a serious point to this, which is nobody has an accurate picture of, we have no accurate data of what the world of 2063 will look like. Okay.
You're right.
What we do have is we have a vast amount of data about what people thought the world 30 years from the point at which they were writing would look like.
Right.
And when you look at that stuff en bloc, what you find is the ideas are just not worthwhile. There's one, I'm not going to name names, but it does make me laugh. It's written in the 60s, and you can see that the guy's kind of been inspired by 2001. And he's a serious scientist, okay, or fairly serious scientist. And in his imagination, the world of today is the whole planet's crust is gridded with these kind of vacuum tubes that serve as subways, and you just know that it's kind of a cylindrical thing that moves through it. And it's traveling at multiple times the speed of sound, so we can be in Japan in a couple of hours. But we have to stop at stations and use a call box to ring home. Okay. And,
Sure,
this
right.
is, and that
Right.
kind of.
So he had the
thing
vision, but
is
he was
all,
off just a tad.
Yeah.
Just a tad.
I have a vision
And
in
they're all,
2063. Yeah.
I had a vision after some bootleg spirit I had in.
Yeah,
I didn't.
right.
Yeah.
But why do we?
I'm
you
just
know-
hoping 2063 Seinfeld's still in syndication. That's my only hope for the future.
And you know what? I wish that for you too.
Thank you.
Professor, thank you.
I hope so,
You
because I
are-
actually missed it. I was in the lab when it was running. I've been watching.
Well, I hear
This
it's
has
very
changed my
strong.
life.
You'll enjoy it, I
Yeah.
think. And you'll learn so much.
And if not, it's not you, it's me.
Exactly.
And by the way, the fascinating
That's
thing
right.
about Seinfeld and the duration of it is that it's relevant today. The next generation got it, but the technology wasn't. No cell phones. They didn't call each other. It was really it's a different time, but it holds up, and you don't miss the cell phone. It's weird. It's really bizarre.
You know what, let's not even go there. I was making a witty remark. That's all I was doing. We don't have to
And
talk
I
about
honestly
the
felt-
relevance of
And I
Seinfeld.
honestly felt obligated to go there
Well, the
because
man,
you're sitting next
where
to
he
me.
is, it's already midnight. Let the man have.
Good night,
some
sir.
rest.
Good night
You know
to
what?
you
Good
both,
night's sleep.
gentlemen.
Good
It's
night's
been a
sleep
pleasure.
extends your life by
Yeah.
a lot.
Yes, I hear that. Good
sleep's very
sleep, but
important.
nice
No one's
sleep.
old.
Professor, thank you.
And maybe a clam. Maybe a clam.
Not a
We'll
soul.
see you in 30, 40 years for the follow-up.
That'll be handy. I look
Yeah, look at
forward
the
to that,
face.
boys.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
happening. Yeah, that's happening. So, that fascinating. Guggenheim has joined us. The interesting thing about the aging topic in gerontology is, like you said, I'll now have a gym membership for 40 years that I don't go to.
Right.
You know, this thing.
It's your favorite line. My doctor said if I got on the treadmill every day, I would live an extra 10 years. And you said, yes, but it's 10 years of treadmill.
10 years of treadmill. So it's that, a divorce.
And then it's what my son Noah said
that was
when
so
he
good.
heard that people could live possibly to 150 years old, and and he was about 10 or 12 years old when he heard this, and he went, first thing out of his mouth, he goes, "Well, that's the end of marriage." I went, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, most people they meet somebody when they're 30, they get married when they're 30. They're together 30 years, you're 60, you go, all right, how long have I got? You tough it out. But if I got another 50 years after that."
And by the way, what's the gift at 80 years married? What's the secret of your long marriage, 80 years? I haven't been able to hear.
I can't get out of the house.
I can't move. I can't walk. The other thing is that our grandparents used to look old. Grandparents today don't look, nobody looks
I'm a
old.
grandfather. Look at me. Don't you make one comment.
And by the way, to David, this is going to impact David.
Yeah.
He's in Florida. Imagine how many people are going to be moving to Florida. Florida's going to tip and fall into the ocean.
And I just tell you.
What do we got? We okay? What did something happen here? Is it okay?
It's all good. It's all good.
Let's see. And by the way, end of life. We have a thing. We have a product that Jason and I have been working on.
That's right, because this is a question that comes up all the time. With my wife and I, we talk about, what happens, living will. And my wife says if I have a hair, for her, if she has a hair out of place and she can't fix it, pull the plug. I have a thing. My wife says, if you're in a vegetated state, what do you want me to do? And I go, well, how long have I been in this state? She goes, 2 months. I go, Am I bothering anybody? Because, something could happen. Something could turn it around. I can see her. She's salivating to pull the plug. She doesn't want the money going out the window. She doesn't want her life to be ruined by, I get it. But you and I came up with a thing.
Because, and this may sound selfish, and I don't mean it as selfish, but I've worked really hard to provide. And I have in the living will, I would like to be a burden to my family. I mean, I'm talking like weekend at Bernie's. I want to go skiing. I want to go to games.
Yeah.
I don't care if I put something under my arms.
Like
that
Larry
smells-
David and Kurt, put me in the passenger seat. You can use the express lane.
Exactly. Put something that smells nice under my arms if I'm starting to decay. Just make sure. What's the rush? What's the rush?
Right.
So my wife, I could see she loves me. She's great.
Yeah.
But I could see her. They say, you know what? Do you want to pull the plug? And she trips on the cord out of the hospital room and goes,
What happened? What happened?
Or nobody's looking, and my
Yank.
son might yank.
Yeah.
So we came up with a brand new product that I think is going to be hot. If you want to invest, this could be your opportunity. It's called
To pull or not to pull.
with the word "to" in there, meaning
TWO, by the way.
TWO. You need 2 fingerprints. That's right, 2 fingerprints on the plug to get it out of the
And
wall.
it can't be the same fingerprint. So it's you and somebody else. So in my case, it would be my wife and my cousin Leonard, who lives, I believe, in Istanbul.
There you go.
Let her find him. He's got an unlisted phone
And
number.
mine would be a friend from high school who I haven't seen in 38 years that she's got to find. So, and it could be who knows where. But I'm just
But
saying.
it's like the nuclear code. You need two people to
That's
turn the key,
exactly right.
two people at the same time to pull
It's
that
the
plug.
to
pull or not to pull.
I think we're on.
I
to
think we
something
got
there.
something big.
I think,
I
we're
think we
done.
got something
And by the
big.
way, our spouse is hearing this now. They're pulling the plug. This was the incentive to pull the
Well,
plug.
and by the way, every my wife had an Aunt Tessie, God bless her. I think she lived to 105. You and I knew Kirk Douglas. He lived
Oh my gosh.
quite to old age. I do know a couple people. My mom was 98 when she passed, right? Every person I know, with very little exception, when they get into that age, they don't, as the professor said, they don't really want.
But you know what, Jay? It's
you know-
because Joan Rivers said this to me, which is really interesting. Is a friend died of hers, and she said, "There are fewer and fewer people that I can say remember when to." And that and I was half joking, but I meant it. If you have a reason to, you just
Yes.
you need that
Right.
purpose. So I think when your mom or whatever, they lose the purpose. There's not. I've
That's
done it.
right.
I've been there. But then again, what would happen if you know you could live to 150? Can you invent a purpose? With
Well,
the
if I told you, honestly, this is a serious question. If I told you you could live fairly healthfully, not, fairly healthfully, 250 years. Now think about that. 250 years. Would you take it?
I suppose. And what's the choice?
Or what we can expect now?
Well, I don't. I couldn't answer. I don't think so because I can't even project what that looks like,
Right.
or if I'd be relevant, or how you work.
Right.
You need a third job. Is it third life? What does that even look like?
Right.
I can't even wrap my head around that. But I will tell you, a Pew study asked people if they would like to live to 125,
Yeah.
and almost 60% said no.
Well, that's what he was referencing.
Yeah, they don't.
I would say no because I can tell you at 63, I'm already beginning to not understand the world. I feel like technology is running away from me. I feel like in some ways sensibilities are beyond my. I grew up at a different time, so those
You don't
are
feel as
the-
relevant.
It's not even my relevance. It's not like I have to have a TV show. It's that because I can feel relevant.
I don't
in my
mean
own
relevant.
body.
I mean, but knowing tech, being able to
I
know the
feel
music,
like,
the culture.
I feel like I don't fit. I'm not contributing.
Well, and by
I'm
the way,
not,
the other part of
you
that
know.
alienation that I'm hearing is, what's a younger generation going to do, the under 50s, with somebody who's 125 and still working because they resent the fact that they're not retiring because I need that job.
Sure.
So there's a lot of moving parts of that. So I don't know. But if you told me it's 250 and I'm on a desert island with the Swedish bikini team, maybe I'm giving it
But that said, my father, who smoked and drank and made it to 92, almost 92. If I don't make it to 92, I want to talk to somebody.
Guggenheim, what do you got?
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of two pulls. Number one, although that's actually why God invented pillows. So get around that.
That's a whole new meaning to my pillow.
Wow, David! Oh, you just
Ooh,
I just
David.
agree. Oh my God!
Oofa,
Yeah,
oofa.
keep your plug. Just step out of the room for a minute. Oh my God!
We didn't think this
know.
product
Hold
through.
on, David.
We didn't
We need
think
a little
it
more
through.
research. A little more
Yeah,
research.
more. Let's get back to R&D.
I think pillowless healthcare, I think, is what we're looking at here. Oh my God! Oh my God!
Wow.
Wow! Pillows with a hole? I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Breathable pillow. My
you go.
breathable pillow. Wow. David, that took us all down a horror.
There you go. Hey, well, now listen. I don't have any information that will keep us
By the
living
way,
longer.
You did your job. You
Yeah.
did your job. I'm really upset with the pillow thing. I completely blindsided me. That's horrible.
Okay.
All I know,
That's basically it.
Yeah.
You know what?
Here's my thing.
Saran wrap in a plastic bag. Also.
all I know is what is the Prevagen? If you eat a
That's it.
jellyfish, you don't lose your mind. I'm eating clams nonstop from now until the day I die.
By the way, I think they should relabel clam soup with the age. Okay.
I got to tell you, right now there's about 1 billion clams going. Oh my God, they're onto it.
This should be eaten before 1846. Thank you, everybody. Wow. I'm really depressed about the film.
You know what? While we're rolling on this one, let me just say thank you to our producers, Lori Crimmy and David Guggenheim. Thank you, everybody listening. This is the Really No Really podcast, available at the iHeart app, at the Apple app, and wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, we're here. And remember to like and subscribe. And we drop a new episode every Tuesday. How do I know that? I am aging in dog years from dropping a
And by
new
the way,
episode every
release.
Tuesday.
Drop is a...
Oh, you want release?
Yeah,
We release a new
No, that's
episode?
what-
You think that's better?
No,
Yeah.
It comes out every Tuesday.
No, not
Whatever,
even-
whatever.
right.
Something happens Tuesdays.
Yeah.
See
Really?
ya.
No,
Yeah,
really.
No, really. Pillows. Really. I got to get rid of pillows.